Hello GameMakers, this is GameMaker Rob. I haven't really been making weekly tutorials recently because most of that time has gone to be making the tactics battle tutorial. For anyone who's waiting for news about my own RPG, I haven't had time to work on it for ages, but I do intend to resume it in future. There's also a real-time RPG that I teased at the end of a video a month or so ago. It's been like 85, 95% finished for ages, and there's just a few things that I need to finish, but it hasn't been a top priority for a while. I'm just trying to keep all the plates spinning that I've got to do. I've got a few different paid projects that I'm working on, tutorials and my own projects, so my own stuff doesn't really come to the top very often. Anyway, the reason for this video is I decided to show and explain the reasons why I've done things in a certain way, like the reasons that I've coded this stuff, just in case it might help you designing your own games, things that I've had to be thinking about over the past few weeks. So the map editor you guys have seen before, it's in a fairly decent place. I'm happy with it for the most part. The mouse control is okay. It's not perfect, but you can always switch to a 2D view like this to make any changes you need to do. So if you guys aren't familiar with making games in isometric, usually the easiest way to go about it is to do everything in 2D and then draw in isometric. But I tend to always get to a point where I'm just making things work or appear to work in the isometric layer. I'm not really looking at 2D, but it's always good to get the 2D stuff on the ground so you can make sure things work. Whenever something seems complicated, I just make sure it works in 2D first. Things like making sure the correct tiles are covered for spell effects, damage, movement, that kind of thing. I always like to, if I'm ever having problems in the isometric, then test it in 2D. That's the way that tends to work. There's one more thing that I wanted to add to the isometric map. At the moment in the editor, it's not easy to change between tiles, or I've only actually coded it to switch between flats and slopes. Obviously, you're going to want to have more tiles than that. So the only thing I plan to add before the release of the tutorial is going to be the ability to add change the tile to a different sprite, whatever that sprite's going to be, and just to make it easier for you to add your own. So everything that I'm trying to do is to make this whole thing adaptable, so you can just add your own stuff to it. There's something else I want to say, but I think I'll leave that for another time. Yeah, so to go back to what I was saying before is I've had to think about the way that I program things, whether it's more not efficient, but whether I'm making things too complicated by doing one thing or another. For example, in the map editor, I made that first. I just used a list for every cell to save the data, so it saves the height, what tile it is, all kinds of information. I forget most of it, but there's about 12 or 13 pieces of information that it saves, and that just gets saved. That gets converted into a string and then saved, so you can load and convert that string back. It works quite well. I'm happy with how that works. And then for the actual battle system, we need an A-star pathing system. I first learned how to do that through a guy called Sergeant Indy on YouTube. He has his own real-time tactics, turn-based tactics, turn-based strategy series. Yeah, turn-based strategy series, and he goes into quite some length about the initial node stage. I'm not going to be doing that. I'm just going to be saying, here's the code. This is how it works. I'll probably do like a brief preview of how things work before we code it. Just try and make things more time effective. So anyway, nodes, every node is going to be an object, and every node is going to be a cell on the grid. And we need to know things like what nodes are connected to which nodes. So usually the nodes that are adjacent to each other are going to be connected. But if you look at what we have here, if I move the orange dude, golden dude down here, and let me just go back to him. So you can see he can't move back up there, because even though he could move from here to here, he couldn't move back from here to here. That's mainly due to the height. Yeah, so I thought I was wrong, but I'm not. I'm right. Basically, this node that this guy is standing on is a neighbor of this node, but this node isn't a neighbor of this one. That's why you can't path from here to here. So, because I've always used objects as nodes, I find it a lot easier. And I was thinking of ways I could just use the same lists that store the information as nodes. And every time I try to think about it, it just seems to make things more complicated. And I thought, it's not gonna make it easier by trying to simplify it, because it's making it more complicated. So the flip side would be to just be using objects instead of lists. But then all I'd be doing when I was saving stuff would be to convert the information from the objects back into a list and then save that, because you can't just save the object. So either way that I did it, I was just making more work. So it just makes sense to have lists that save the map information, and then make objects for the nodes just for the battle, but we don't need to save them because they just get created when the game loads. So yeah, that's one of the main things that I've been thinking about and implementing. Apart from that, I've also been making the series more open to extension, like I said. So for example, just rather than having like, the easy way would be to have one weapon, two weapons, one for melee, one for ranged, and maybe one spell. But when it comes to somebody trying to add more stuff to it, I don't think that would make it easy for them. So I have to put more work into every system that I do. So for example, you might want to have a melee weapon with a range of 2. You might want to have a melee weapon that does AoE damage. So I just need to account for things like that. So every weapon they've all got the same stats. You can change the range. You'll be able to change the AoE effect, that kind of stuff. Most weapons will just be adjacent tile and no AoE. But like I said, you can change that however you want. And things like spells. So I completely forgot how Tactics Ogre does their action list. I had to watch a video just to remind myself. So the one that I watched, whenever it's a unit's turn, you get a list of actions that the player can take, ranging from movement, melee, range, spells to end the turn, items as well. And each unit has 2 hands, obviously, but they can hold different things in those hands. They may or may not have tombs which have spells. Each tomb will give you access to all like at least 3 different spells. You might have 2 melee weapons. You might have 1 bow and 1 melee weapon. So to make the action list dynamic, I need to code for that as well. That's what I'm doing at the moment. That's the most latest thing. So, and it takes longer to develop and make sure everything works, which is why this series is taking so long. but at the end of the day, we should end up with something that you can take and modify and change how you like. Some things you're not going to be able to change easily. You'll have to code yourself. If you don't like the way the game does something, you need to code that yourself. But I do intend to add more features to the actual project when I put it on itch. If there's some requested features that people want, then I want to maintain that. And I might have said this before on like a Patreon video, but I wasn't really happy with the way that I changed things halfway through in the RPG starter kit. I wanted to add features for people, but it also meant making changes to stuff and creating bugs because I didn't design features with the new stuff in mind. That's whenever I'm coding a feature, I like to know exactly how it's going to work, and I just code it for that. So yeah, with this one, I just want to create the whole thing, make videos, release the videos, put it on itch, and then add stuff to it afterwards. It's a lot easier for me to make changes to my code without having to worry about making a tutorial about it as well. So I think that'll be easy for me. Yeah, but that's it. I couldn't really think of a good idea for a tutorial today that would take me less than take me an hour to code it, record it, and edit it. Like, I would need something quite small for that. So I just thought people tend to like, or some people like a behind the scenes video, and that's what this is. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I will catch you next time. Bye for now.